Barry Collins from Circana. We couldn't get subtitles working today, so you might have to bear with the Irish accent for a while. But really what I'm here about to talk to you with is retail media. And I think ultimately something that's been bubbling under the surface is around measurement in retail media, and specifically ROI. How are we looking at it? How are we thinking about it? And we are attributing the effect of retail media properly. And I think it's fair to say retail media is kind of having its moment, and rightly so. It's one of those kind of key channels where you can directly start to attribute advertising to that sales outcome, connecting it directly to that purchase behavior. But with that growth is bringing a lot of scrutiny. And with scrutiny brings questions, and with questions comes stuff like, are we measuring the right things? Are we attributing the right amount of value to campaigns that we're running? Are we looking at it in the right time frame? Are we looking at how it's impacting on a longer term basis? So these are all opening up questions that we need to kind of think about, and as the industry work through how do we solve for that, and how do we start to make better, more informed decisions around retail media. And I think we've all seen these similar slides, but just wanted to kind of take a moment and kind of highlight retail media is big and it's growing. I think probably growing is an understatement. It's going through a transformative period. Last year, estimated numbers around $850 million. I think that's already after a growth rate of kind of astronomical numbers over a couple of years. And it continues to grow, estimated to be over 3 billion by 2027. And when we look at CPG brands in particular, over 73% of them plan to increase their spend. And really that growth is kind of underpinned by three benefits. It's point to purchase. Retail media reaches millions of people when they're in that buying mode. It's opening up the ability to target people. So using that first party data to, or as well as kind of plan and inform decision making, actually target them and hyper target them. And accountability. Ultimately it's given us that kind of, as it's been often termed, kind of the holy grail of closed loop measurement. But I think one of the important things to think about is just because we have the data and we can measure it, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily measuring the right things. And that's where we start to see some of those kind of challenges unfold. So in the recent State of the Nation from IAB, some really interesting kind of statistics that we're seeing coming out. And with brands and agencies, some kind of real challenges around how they perceive what they're getting from a measurement perspective. What we're also seeing is kind of what they're looking for as well. So ROAS coming out really high, obviously incrementality key with that as well. But it's going, well, is ROAS only telling us a part of the story? Is it actually attributing sales to new customers? Are we looking at the incremental impact of sales? Is there an over dependency on it? And are we really getting to the button of what's actually driving our business outcomes for brands? And I think with Circana, that's where we're thinking about it, a shifting of a mindset. So how can we move towards actually going, what's the real impact this is driving? Is it acquiring new customers? Is it moving us to a space of actually we're delivering incremental sales? Is it shifting the dial from a brand perspective in terms of loyalty, frequency, share of wallet of those customers? But as we talk about incrementality, I suppose really that is only a part of the journey, and I think Andy will talk about how kind of crucial it is. But as we go through these steps, we'll continue to evolve with that, but incrementality and incremental ROI is ultimately at the core of what we need to use as a starting basis for measurement as well. But when we think about incrementality, probably starting to get into the kind of real nuts and bolts of it, it's going, how do we match our measurement to our objectives as a business? So really, what is that needle that we're trying to move? Are we trying to acquire new customers? Are we trying to shift buying patterns and build more loyalty among customers? Are we looking at a longer term incremental return on that customer? Because ultimately, it's probably fair to say if you're driving a change in behavior on a customer, that value of it is just not isolated to the campaign. At a longer term basis, it can drive real change and real incremental return for us. So really it's about how do we start to leverage those tools in the right way to drive business objectives and meet those business objectives, and use measurement as a tool to understand and change and meet those business objectives. So with that, I'll bring Andy up on stage and we'll talk to some of those questions in a bit more depth.
What do you want me?
Yep.
Okay. You've raced through those slides.
Yeah, that went a lot quicker than I thought.
You've got some filler questions.
Yeah, but we do have a few questions, and everybody was really keen to hear you talk, so had to get you up on stage pretty quickly. So I suppose before we go, who are you and why are you here?
It's a good question. I'm Andy Ford. As Gay said, I've probably been on the stage a few too many times, and I should pass it around to my team, so I should do that in future. My job is the head of measurement for Coles 360, so I'm in charge of building out all the measurement products that we need to build and implement to meet the needs of our 4,000 plus suppliers, the sophisticated and the more basic types of tools, and then also getting those into their hands and helping them understand the results of those that measurement and what to do next. So it's a pretty broad and varied role, and I feel quite conscious that I'm sitting on the stage, and the spoiler, we're going to be talking about incrementality and why we have to make that shift.
Good. And I suppose I touched on ROAS. First question, why is it such a seductive metric for marketeers, and probably what are the risks of relying on it a bit too heavily?
I like the fact that you used the word seductive there, Barry, if I'm honest. Look, I guess it's, even the word ROAS, like if you unpick it, most people just do it as a revenue over ad spend. They don't even do it as a return on ad spend. They just take a top line number divided by a cost. So really people aren't thinking about what that return aspect is, and that's just a definition that seems to be very inconsistent between companies and people. But ultimately, I guess why it's seductive is it's easy-ish. So you can find some level of revenue change and divide it into the cost, and similar sort of things with last click, and people like things they can work out and explain very easily. But it is obviously susceptible to external factors. So price, promotion, weather, today, ranging, all those kind of things are all those aspects are going to influence it, and it doesn't account for that. So it makes it quite a large risk relying solely on it. It does have its uses. It is scalable. It can be worked out very quickly. But certainly people have to know, accept its flaws and risks if they're going to use it.
And I suppose, do you see within retail media specifically, is that risk higher? Is it lower?
We're very guilty of it, yeah. So we can't even, and I have to be careful what I say here, but even though it gets into the vernacular, right? And some people can mean it just in terms of the ability to close the loop, which we're in a good place to do. Some people will mean it as just revenue over cost. Some people will mean it as genuine return on ad spend. So, and it just chops and changes interchangeably. But most people, I'd say in retail media, just are looking at it as the ability to close the loop, which is a lot more than that. We also, we have a large proportion of the country shopping. So a lot of these people walking down that aisle anyway are probably going to pick something up anyway. So it doesn't really take that into account. And then, as most suppliers will know in retail world, is that the promotion drug is very real. They really enjoy that spike in sales. So it doesn't really take into account of that. So yeah, I say retail media is pretty guilty of the risks in using a ROAS. And obviously the shift to incrementality is what will help isolate the impact of that media. But even that can be tricky, right? A lot of our campaigns require a large sort of lead booking times. It's not just a matter of just setting up an experiment. So we really have to focus on how we balance incrementality with scale, accuracy, and also usefulness. So it's not as easy as said, everyone should just do an incremental.
And I suppose everyone loves a kind of tangible example.
That's why I've got my paper.
Yeah, good. Do you have one where you've kind of seen a high ROAS number, but not necessarily really it being true incremental?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, and most publishers will retail media networks has included have these examples. I just pulled one from the international food category, and we saw a ROAS of 8.5, and then we measured it with an incremental and saw 2.44. So different numbers. One is more accurate than the other. Obviously, one is bigger, and people like bigger numbers. So how you'd view those and what you might do afterwards is going to be slightly different. And then, it's not an uncommon situation where we would have, a ROAS here for soft drinks of 2.7. It's not Coke, by the way, Anna. By the way, I'm just making sure. It would be way higher if it was. But and then an incremental number of 0.71. So, actually what you would deem success there, from one metric you'd say that was successful, and the other you'd say you wouldn't. So they do vary. They do require a bit of an adjustment. One's bigger than the other, as I said, and people like the bigger numbers, but it is important to get to as accurate as possible.
Good. And I suppose, I touched on earlier, we talked on the kind of the benefits of retail media more broadly, and one of them being attribution and closed loop measurement, and it effectively being the kind of retail media being that measurement dream. So I suppose why incremental, and probably what's one of the reasons everyone isn't doing it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the reasons for incremental we touched on already is around isolating the impact of media. Look, I guess it is more possible within retail media, but it is just really hard, and it is hard to do across different types of channels. We have physical media, we have audio, we have digital media, we have off-network as well via other platforms. So it's actually very hard to align on one single technique, and we actually end up having quite a variety of different incremental techniques. Using, some use randomized control trials, some of them are using more synthetic controls because it's the only way we can do it. So it isn't easy. It does require quite a toolkit and a lot of planning to do. And retail media is again guilty of this. It's the omni-channel side of it, so it makes us very appealing, but also makes it very hard. So I'm not making excuses. It's what my job is. I've got to build this roadmap out, and I've got to get this measurement into the hands of the right people and the right campaigns. But it's not an easy task to just say, we'll just measure incremental, and then from there on, everything is set up to do so.
Cool. And I suppose, are you seeing that is there any other aspects you feel are being missed by just purely looking at a campaign ROAS?
Yeah, if you focus on the R, I guess, and just in terms of the return, not revenue, then some of those metrics you were talking about earlier, and these are things that we can see, which are really helpful. But new customers, lapsed customers, these are the types of things you would treat differently if you were able to get a view on them instead of just an aggregate view of revenue. So we looked at with yourselves at Sakana, we looked at 100 customer lift studies. I think we saw on average there was 30% of customers who purchased the brand after being exposed were actually new to the brand. So that kind of information, you would treat how that campaign performed very differently, knowing you were acquiring new customers, and I think 2/3 of those had never bought in the category before as well. So you were getting people into the category who could then buy again. So very different view to just looking at the total revenue that they'd have received. I guess the other area, just to call out, is the total impact of the campaign. Often people look at a 2-week campaign and measure it by 2 weeks. We've been looking at those lift tests longer. So we've been looking at those with yourselves as well, with Sakana, and over a 3-month period after the campaign, we saw that 2.44 iROAS I mentioned earlier go up to 8.10, so 3.7x by just measuring how much incremental impact happened after the campaign as well. So we are seeing that, and it's really useful. And again, if you just took that 2-week view of the campaign, if you just measured it as a revenue overspend, then you would get a very, very different view of the impact you're having. So just make that kind of insight gives a lot of, it's very useful for how you then allocate those dollars.
Yeah, and I think it does really point back to what I touched on earlier, is really getting to the crux of what are the right measurement techniques and approaches to use for campaigns, and what are the right kind of insights to be going after. I suppose for you, what is the toolkit to leverage incrementality, and what is Course 360 doing?
Yeah, we're basically trying to build out a framework or a matrix of metrics, and I've mentioned this before to quite a few people, but give me the mic and I'll say it again. And it's based around basic, better, and best, and we've got that worked out by every single channel that we operate. If is it in store, is it on our site, is it off network, and we're filling that grid out because we know that those metrics are useful for the large variety of different suppliers and their sophistication that they have. So we are building out attribution methodologies in our kind of better methodology. We've got pre-post in our basic, and we're focusing on some incremental solutions in our best. So we are, at the moment, we have, in partnership with Sakana, we have a one-to-one customer synthetic control uplift methodology, which is great, very versatile. We have a store-based one where we hold back media playing and being seen in certain stores, which is called Market Lift. So we're trying to look at whether we can do audio and digital screens and physical point of sale as well, and isolate those impacts. And then we're also shifting that incremental thinking towards modelled approaches as well. So a lot of our suppliers want to know more than just what did this 2-week campaign do. They want to know what did my 3 months of investment with you do, or this very large multi-brand campaign. What was our share of impact on that? So we've been looking into some of the more model techniques as well.
And yeah, really good point to touch on around model. It's probably something we're hearing lots of more recently around kind of measurement circles. I was really keen to understand kind of what are you thinking in this space, and how are you guys approaching it?
Well, that was your brief, basically. So yeah, we gave that one to you because you're our measurement partner. So look, we are trying to learn from the MMM world. There's a lot of talk about MMM today. We are trying to leverage the evolution and techniques there, and see if we can get it down to a bit more granularity on a large campaign or a period of time for just Coles retail media investment. So, and we think we've been able to do that as well. So we've got some early results and things that we just couldn't measure before. They were across too many channels. There was a lot of noise. It was too hard to do any randomised control trials or synthetic data. It was just impossible. So we've been able to use that technique that you guys have built for us, and we've seen some great results where we just literally couldn't see a result before. So I'm not going to mention the brand because I don't think I'm allowed to, but you know, we had suppliers asking us, what is the iROAS I'm going to get for this? And in this particular brand, we saw a 1.38 iROAS on a result before. We've never been able to actually explain to them the impact of their total investment. And there's similar ones in there as well. In dental, around 27% of customers who participate in the program bought Colgate again afterwards. So I just said the brand. Dental. If I hadn't called that out, would anyone have noticed? I don't know. Anyway, so look, it's great. It is requiring a little bit more hand-holding of the suppliers, explaining the methodology. It is modelled. It's not quite as easy to explain and see, but it is enabling us to get a read on isolating that effective media using more progressive techniques.
And good to see we answered the brief.
You do. Just make it cheaper.
You're getting a good incremental ROAS on it. So I suppose before we kind of wrap up the questions, for you, what are some of those kind of actual metrics that people should really care about as they're thinking about building out that measurement framework?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the first panel talking about that framework earlier as well, and then, you know, obviously Google mentioned Meridian and triangulating and all those things. It's clear that incremental and experiments plays a big role. I guess one of the metrics, instead of looking at a ROAS, or whether ROAS is possible, how many of your campaigns are you measuring with an incremental methodology? Like, is it enough to actually make some informed decisions on and have a good view of that, instead of just like one-off experiments here and there? You should be thinking about how many times do I get an accurate source of truth on this? And then to go to the point earlier around new customers, lapsed customers, all these things that you can see that you should care about, you know, how many times are you actually measuring that against the objective of your campaign, instead of just grouping it up into a total revenue over cost number? So really pushing yourself to think about that objective as well. What one metric do you think everyone should listen to?
I am going in the wrong direction here, but that flows nicely into my top takeaways. And I think
seamless, absolutely seamless.
It's like we planned this.
Yeah.
But I think, as opposed to metrics, it's a couple of things to think about really for us is thinking of retail media as more than just a short-term sales lever and integrating it into your broader marketing mix. I think matching your measurement to your campaign objectives. So that point of incrementality, but new customers. What is the impact on customer if you're trying to acquire new customers? What is the longer term impact? and moving away from some of those vanity metrics that help us enable optimization, and ultimately, with this measurement framework, improving the execution.
Nice.
Cool. I think we might be on time. Or questions? Yep.
Now then. Multitasking particularly badly. Here we go. Andy.
Not Barry.
How do you balance short-term sales impact with long-term brand building?
Right now, I focus on short term at the moment because it's the bigger ask from our suppliers is accurate campaign measurement. So we are focusing there. We are looking at, as we build out our product suite and we offer more branding solutions, what brand measurement we need to do. But at the moment, the majority of the focus is pretty much at the point end of the funnel where retail media focuses. I would say we are, as all the publishers are, and Navi was saying it earlier, we are looking at how we export the right data to support market mix models a bit better. Our data can be quite disparate, and we're spending a lot of time getting that in a good format to make that easier so people can then measure the long term and the short term as well.
Very honest answer. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm big and slow and old. I'm not running anywhere. Where are we?
Sorry, I'd come to you without my crutches. Okay. Hi, I was wondering, both of you spoke briefly about the time periods in which you should measure and kind of also how you can isolate the impact of the marketing or the ads. I was wondering, what kind of advice would you give to finding kind of that optimal window for the dozens or 24 channels that you have?
Yeah, look, I think it is a mix. Ultimately, you want to test the campaign itself, but then you're looking into, okay, what is the effective attribution window that you want to look at? And that varies from category and brand. So a key indicator here to kind of test on that is that inter-purchase interval. So then you're getting a clearer lens of, okay, how often are customers likely to come back? So at what time frame do we need to start to assess that kind of longer term incrementality? So should it be 3 months or 6 months as we go into that kind of overall return on customer piece from a campaign?
Yeah, I agree. It's very much category dependent, really. We're thinking about it. We've only just started looking into this a bit more, and we think it's an interesting area just to see that, you know, the gap between the test and the control just continue, and which is great when you can get someone new to category trialing it. So we're not quite sure on the exact point that runs out yet.
You've been described in Slido as a celebrity guest speaker for MeasureUp, Andy. How about that? Someone wants to know, and it's not really. Well, yeah, what is measurement related? What did you used to believe years ago that you no longer believe now?
I quite like that question.
Yeah, so do I.
I guess I used to be quite purist on this. I used to think everything had to be like the best possible experiment to really prove something out. And if you couldn't do it, then you couldn't prove it. And I think probably in my more recent couple of years, I'm a bit more focused on what's useful and what's good enough, accurate enough, scalable enough, insightful enough, practical enough, as a bit more of a middle ground rather than shit canning stuff that I didn't think was as good.
Right.
So yeah, that's probably my main shift recently.
You've just been gradually worn down.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I've probably become a little bit more commercial in my thinking.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Any time for any more? Oh, here we go.
Oh, this is a loaded question.
How's it going, Andy?
I see you, Hamish.
Yeah. In terms of suppliers and their expectations, obviously one would assume that their expectations are increasing in terms of the quality of the data that's coming back to them. Like, how do you, like, your observation, how much more are they demanding in terms of complexity from a reporting perspective, and how do you guys manage that to get the balance right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you used to work at Coles, so you're going to know the answers to these questions. But look, it varies massively, and we have to cover the full breadth of it. Some just literally want to know their media was delivered, how many impressions they got, or how many stores their ads were put in. and some are really like, I want this in a real-time dashboard right now where I can make decisions on it. So we're having to build it all as quickly as possible and make decisions and trade-offs everywhere we go. We are trying to take some of the decision out of it for some people as well. Like, we know that if we have an incremental piece of measurement, we just have a better conversation about the performance of the campaign. So we're trying to take some of the lead up of like, do you want a lift test, to just like actually doing it. That then requires a bit more like explaining the results, explaining the methodology. So we're trying to increase the volume of our campaigns that are done using incremental techniques without relying on people to want them, or a sales team to do it. So I don't have a particularly succinct answer on it, but we have to do everything. Suppliers want this stuff real time, they want dashboards, all these things. Some are happy with a PDF. So we're kind of building it all out and just focusing where we think the biggest improvement for the experience of the suppliers is going to be.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. A big round of applause for Andy and Barry.